بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
الله وبركاته. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تمسك بهديه. أما بعد. With regards to al-i'tikaf, the rulings of al-i'tikaf, the virtue of al-i'tikaf, the last 10 nights of the blessed month of Ramadan, is it a condition that you be fasting when you make i'tikaf? It is a condition that you make i'tikaf in Ramadan? Or can you make i'tikaf outside of Ramadan? What is al-i'tikaf? These things, they come up every single year. We've done many classes on this before, and I would say one of the things that help us understand al-i'tikaf and its rulings and its virtues, the etiquettes, the do's and the don'ts, is to realize the wisdom behind al-i'tikaf. Why? Why was it legislated? As Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha narrated, that the Prophet ﷺ made i'tikaf, and his wives also did it after he passed on, alayhi salatu wasalam, in the authentic hadith. So al-i'tikaf is legislated in this, or based off of this authentic hadith. But now the question is, what's the proper way of doing it? And why do we find so many mistakes, so many errors, and so much misconfusion about al-i'tikaf? Let's think about the salah. What is the purpose of making a salah? What is the wisdom of the salah? What are we to benefit from the salah? As a man say what? He said what? Pray. Now, you have this problem? Pray. You have that problem? Pray, etc. But why? Is the obligation of prayer the only thing that you get from prayer? Is to remove the obligation? Or is it something that is a fruit, a benefit, and a change? Whether it is instant or whether it's long term. So therefore, the salah has twofold. There is a wisdom of making prayer even if you don't get nothing from it. And then there's a wisdom and a benefit from the prayer once you do the obligation. Al-i'tikaf is a bit different. A salah, if you don't focus on your salah, you don't get nothing from your salah, there's no doubt that you should still what? Make salah, pray. Because you're going to be punished if you don't, and you may not be a Muslim if you do not pray. So that is with regards to the fard, hajj. Make it for once in your lifetime, even if you don't understand it. If you don't do it 100% perfect or perfectly. Fasting in the month of Ramadan, you have a problem with other sins, but continue to fast. I still listen to this and watch this and have this, but at least I'm not eating and drinking, because those things are fard. You must do them, and if you don't do them, you get punished. And hopefully, if you continue to make salah, fast Ramadan, give zakat, make hajj, and do the obligatory things, the fruits within the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will creep their way in, one way or another. But when you have something that isn't mandatory, something that is totally voluntary, something that is extra, then you have to take a different approach. Because it's not obligatory. And if you're not doing it, and if you're not getting the fruit out of it, and the virtue out of it, as if it's no point in what? Doing it, because it isn't mandatory. The salah is different though. Hajj is different, one time. But zakat is different. These things you have to do. There's a responsibility that falls upon your neck that you must remove, period. Whether you understand it or not, whether you benefit it or not. But al-i'tikaf and other things, there has to be a tangible fruit. And you can't get that tangible fruit and the virtues and the do's and don'ts unless you know what is the main purpose of al-i'tikaf. People that go to the masjid, they ask the question, can I read books? Can I read Quran? Can I watch something? Can I go to janazah? Can I use the bathroom? Can I go outside to eat? Can I comb my hair in the i'tikaf? Can I sleep in the daytime? At nighttime? Do I have to make tarawih? And the list goes on. All of these questions oftentimes go back to the concept of al-i'tikaf. Why was it legislated? What is the purpose behind it? Everybody understand this? Because it isn't mandatory until you make it mandatory upon yourself through a vow. Now I want to share with you, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, some speech from Al-Hafidh ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala regarding the purpose of al-i'tikaf. He says, لما كان صلاح القلب واستقامته على طريق سيره إلى الله تعالى متوفقا أو متوقفا على جمعيته على الله ولم شعثه بإقباله بالكلية على الله تعالى فإن شعث القلب لا يلومه إلا الإقبال على الله تعالى وكان فضول الطعام والشراب وفضول مخالطة الأنام وفضول الكلام وفضول المنام مما يزيده شعثا ويشتته في كل واد ويقطعه أو يقطعه أو يقطعه عن سيره إلى الله تعالى أو يضعفه أو يعوقه ويوقفه. اقتضت رحمة العزيز الرحيم بعباده أن شرع لهم من الصوم ما يذهب فضول الطعام والشراب ويستفرغ من القلب أخلاق الشهوات المعوقة له عن سيره إلى الله تعالى، وشرعه بقدر المصلحة بحيث ينتفع به العبد في دنياه وأخراه ولا يضره ولا يقطعه عن مصالحه العاجلة والآجلة. وشرع لهم الاعتكاف الذي مقصوده وروحه عكوف القلب على الله تعالى وجمعيته عليه والخلوة به والانقطاع عن الاشتغال بالخلق والاشتغال به وحده سبحانه، بحيث يسير ذكره وحبه والإقبال عليه في محل هموم القلب وخطراته، فيستولي عليه بدلها ويسير الهم كله به والخطرات كلها بذكره والتفكر في تحصيل مراضيه وما يقرب منه، فيسير أنسه بالله بدلا عن أنسه بالخلق، فيعده بذلك لأنسه به يوم الوحشة في القبور حين لا أنيس له ولا ما يفرح أو يفرح به سواه. فهذا مقصود الاعتكاف الأعظم. Ibn al-Qayyim, he says in his very beautiful words, rahimahullah ta'ala, since he makes a point here, he says that the salah, the prosperity of a person's heart, the straightness of a person's heart, the success of a person's heart, it's dependent upon one thing. And that one thing is that person's heart to be connected to Allah, to be focused upon Allah, and to have total and absolute concentration and stillness thinking about this Lord. Since the only way that your heart can be right, and if your heart is right, inshallah, your body will be right, your mind will be right, and everything will fall in place in this life and thereafter. Since the only way you can get that is by being focused on Allah and by turning and devoting yourself to Allah. Since that's the case, we can agree upon it as Muslims, rather as human beings. The only true success is when your heart is connected to your Maker, your cherisher, subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the only way that you can be 100% straight. Since that's the case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated for his slaves a way to get rid of the excess baggage of food, of drink, of sleep, and of mixing with people. Because too much food, too much drinking, too much sleeping, too much sexual intercourse, too much mixing, laughing, and joking, it has an effect upon your what? The concentration and the heart's focus upon Allah. Since that's the case, from Allah's rahmah, he says, the rahmah of Allah is that he made for them a way out, a door, a flight square to get away from that attack of those other things. And that thing is what? Siyam, fasting. That thing is what? Fasting. Allah giving you Ramadan as a rahmah, as a mercy for you to get rid of the excess baggage. Everybody understand this? He then says, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says all of these things, these lusts, these whims, and these desires, which jump and attack a person's heart, the person needs to get rid of them. He needs to what? Drop some of that extra baggage from his qalb. And fasting, what? It assists. And it aids you in doing that. He then says, and since there are many things that can come in the road and hinder him, Allah has also legislated al-i'tikaf. And he says, the ruh, the spirit of i'tikaf, the lifeblood of al-i'tikaf, the main objective and the greatest purpose is this. Is the heart devoting itself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not just sleeping in the masjid, not being away from your family for 10 days, not taking a shower and smelling, not sleeping in a tent. Wherever you get this done, you do it. But i'tikaf allows you to do it in a specific way. So this is the main reason behind Allah, the Sublime and the Exalted, and the Rasul sallallahu legislating and laying down the ruling of al-i'tikaf. Is to seclude oneself with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to do away with busying yourself from the creatures and the created beings. To busy yourself with the Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when a person's loneliness becomes his closeness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when a person's stress and worry and thoughts of the dunya are exchanged and they're replaced with thinking about Allah, thinking about Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, focusing on Allah, the mighty and the majestic. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, and indeed there will come a day in which he will be placed in the grave, and there will be no one to keep him company. There won't be any worries or any thoughts. Who am I? Where am I going? Who, what, how, when, and where? And the only one that can keep him company in that grave, and the only one who can give him succor and deliver him from the stress of the grave and of the hereafter and resurrection, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Since this is 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, this is why we have what? Al-i'tikaf. The first step was what? The straightness of the heart. Success in this life and hereafter. It lies upon one thing. And these other things that you need to eat. You need to drink. You need to sleep. And you also need to have sexual intercourse. It's a necessity of a human being. However, too much, surplus things, it causes what? Harm. So therefore, this is your diet. Your spiritual what? Diet. And similarly, al-i'tikaf is your social diet. I love my wife, I love my children, my friends, but I need what? Some time alone. A woman says, I love my husband, I love my children, but I need some what? Time alone. Not at the spa, not in the gym, just for my body, but I need some time for my what?
Inside.
My qalb, my inside, my ruh, my soul, my spirit. So this is the main purpose of al-i'tikaf. So let's just stop now. If this is the reason behind al-i'tikaf, does it make any sense to go to the masjid where you're going to be laughing and joking and playing and having fun, playing football, soccer, cricket in the yard of the masjid or inside the masjid? Or if you have your smartphone in i'tikaf, watching a video, watching a movie, doing this, doing that. As if you've already flattened the tire of your i'tikaf mobile. Everybody understand this? So this is tremendous hikmah. It's to know why is the thing what? Legislated. Why is it what? Legislated. But Salah is legislated for many reasons. But you still have to do it no matter what period. The i'tikaf is a bit different. So let us just ponder upon what Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala says. ولما كان هذا المقصود وإنما يتم مع الصوم شرع الاعتكاف في أفضل أيام الصوم والعشر الأخير من رمضان ولم ينقل عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اعتكف مضطرا قط أو he says مفطرا قط بل قد قالت عائشة لا اعتكاف إلا بصوم ولم يذكر الله سبحانه الاعتكاف إلا مع الصوم ولا فعله رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلا مع الصوم فالقول الراجح في الدليل الذي عليه جمهور السلف أن الصوم شرط في الاعتكاف والذي كان يرجحه شيخ الإسلام أبو العباس ابن تيمية ومن كلامه فإنه شرع للأمة حبس اللسان عن كل ما لا ينفع في الآخرة. He then says rahimahullah ta'ala, and since a person cannot get this unless he fasts, Allah paired the two together and He linked them together. In other words, you can do away with excess food, excess drink, excess this and that, but you can't do it 100% unless it's what? Fasting. So he says here they go hand in hand. They go what? Hand in hand. And this is why Allah Azza wa Jalla only mentions i'tikaf when He speaks on Sawm. And the Prophet ﷺ, according to Ibn Qayyim says, he only made i'tikaf when he was what? Fasting. He never made i'tikaf, according to what he says, when he broke his fast. Rather, Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, لا i'tikaf illa bisawm. She said there's no i'tikaf unless a person is what? Fasting. So he says here, the strongest view, he's getting to a fifth issue now, is that a person cannot make i'tikaf unless they're doing what? Fasting. That's not what we're going to get into right now. We're not getting into no technicalities of fiqh at this point. Is it permissible to make i'tikaf outside Ramadan? Can I make i'tikaf and I'm not fasting? That's a different issue. The most important purpose for us is to understand why i'tikaf. If you're going to go to the masjid and you can help others, they can help you, that's one thing. You're going to the masjid, people want to talk to you, play with you, then that's what? Totally different. So this is why you find the mistakes in the i'tikaf. Because most people don't understand the true purpose of it. It's not just a retreat to spend the night in the masjid. It's not just tent in the masjid, sleeping bag in the masjid, have fun in the masjid. It's not a masjid sleepover. But it's a spiritual retreat. So if you don't have that in your mind already, you've what? You've lost. And when you understand this, you get the ruling to all of the other questions. Can I read Quran? What's better, reading Quran or seeking knowledge? Some people they ask. Should I stand up in prayer or sit down and read the Quran? What is better for your soul? What makes you feel closer to Allah and further away from shaitan and from your nafs? You have to be the judge in this. And you have to prioritize in your performance of ibadah. That which isn't mandatory, of course. That which is a virtue, that which is supererogatory, you have to do what? Prioritize. And that's why the Prophet says, those whom Allah wants good for, gives them what? Fiqh fi din. And from fiqh fi din is knowing when to and how to what? Prioritize. You don't have time for everything. There's certain things more important than others, but I feel more comfortable when I read this book. This is virtue, that's extra, but this helps me feel better. And this helps him feel better. So you have to prioritize. So once you realize this, your itikaf becomes what? 101% easier. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah then says, وَأَمَّا الْكَلَامِ فَإِنَّهُ شُرِعَ لِلْأُمَّةِ حَبْسُ اللِّسَانِ عن كل ما لا ينفع في الآخرة. وأما فضول المنام فإنه شرع له من قيام الليل ما هو من أفضل السهر وأحمده عاقبة، وهو السهر المتوسط الذي ينفع القلب والبدن ولا يعوق عن مصلحة العبد. He then says, as for speech, extra speech, then Allah has legislated for us not to talk about things that are not beneficial, things that don't benefit in the hereafter. You shouldn't talk about them. He says, as for excess sleep, he says, then Allah has made it for them to get rid of the excess sleep by making qiyam al-layl. Like, look at the blessing of Allah. He's giving you a way out from all of these problems. Too much this, too much that. There is an Islamic solution to it. He says, in the sleep and staying up at night, he says it's good for the heart and good for the body. Not too much sleep, not too much, late night staying up, but as a what? A balance. He says the amount of sleep that you need and the amount of sahar, staying up in prayer, that is good for you and doesn't prevent you from working, from focusing, and from being on time and doing what you have to do in the daytime. He then says, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَمَدَارُ رِيَاضَةِ أَرْبَابِ الرِّيَاضَاتِ وَالسُّلُوكِ عَلَى هَذِهِ الْأَرْكَانِ الْأَرْبَعَةِ وَأَسْعَدُهُمْ بِهَا مَنْ سَلَكَ فِيهِ الْمِنْهَاجِ النَّبَوِيَّ الْمُحَمَّدِيِّ ولم ينحرف انحراف الغالين ولا قصر تقصير المفرطين. وقد ذكرنا هدي صلى في صيامه وقيامه وكلامه، فلنذكر هديه في اعتكافه. كان صلى الله عليه وسلم يعتكف العشر الأواخر من رمضان حتى توفاه الله عز وجل، وتركه مرة فقضاه في شوال. He says, and the wise men, the learned men, men who have deep understanding, they base their success off of those 4 tiers, those 4 things. Not having access, food, drink, sleep, and speech. Everybody understand this? And he says, and there's some that go extreme in some issues, but the best of them are those who are balanced and who follow the Prophet's methodology. In other words, it's not the sunnah to be a eunuch. It's not the sunnah to be a hermit. It's not the sunnah to fast and never ever to speak. It's not the sunnah to starve yourself. It's not the sunnah just to eat bread and dirty water. That's not the sunnah. But it isn't the sunnah to pick out and gorge and feast and speak and talk and be a fool and idiot and talk and laugh all the time. There's a what? There's a balance. And the only way which you know how much, how less is by what? Hadith. That's it. What did the Prophet do? What did the Prophet didn't do? I read in a book that the student of knowledge shouldn't talk at all when he's outside in public because it takes away from the respect. Did the Prophet take that approach? Is that what the Prophet instructed? Did the Prophet talk to the Sahaba in public? Did the Sahaba talk to the Prophet in public? So we say that's no good. Everybody understand this? Ibn al-Qayyim, he says, we've explained to you already how the Prophet ﷺ fasted, how he stood, and how he spoke. Now let's talk about his i'tikaf. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ used to make i'tikaf in the last 10 nights of Ramadan until Allah took his soul. And there was one time in which he did make i'tikaf and he made it up in the month of Shawwal. He made it up in the month of Shawwal. واعتكف مرة في العشر الأول ثم الأوسط ثم العشر الأخير يلتمس ليلة القدر ثم تبين له أنها في العشر الأخير فداوم على اعتكافه حتى لحق بربه عز وجل. One time the Prophet made i'tikaf in the first 10 nights. And another time he made i'tikaf in the and then he made it in the last 10, and he was seeking and searching for Laylatul Qadr until it became clear to him that it was in what? The last 10, and that's what he remained upon. So, a person may say it's permissible to make i'tikaf in the first 10 nights, or the second 10 nights. But the most virtuous time, and which is most likely to be Laylatul Qadr, is when? The last 10. Ibn al-Qayyim then says, وَكَانَ يَأْمُرُ بِخِبَاءٍ فَيُضْرَبُ لَهُ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ يَخْلُو فِيهِ بِرَبِّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. And there was sometimes what you told the people to give him a tent, some type of shelter, some type of covering to be placed in the masjid, and which he could go in the masjid and be away from the people. And there's another very important faida. You can't make i'tikaf in the masjid where all your students are. Because they're going to do what? Come and ask you, Zakariya, Sheikh, Ustad, can I read? So sometimes from the fiqh of i'tikaf is making i'tikaf in a place in which you're total what? Stranger. Let alone your friends, talking about Steph Curry, this one and that one, and he's going to be traded to the Warriors and Flan, the NBA won't allow it. Everybody understand this? Because you're going to get into this type of conversation. Everybody clear on this? So sometime from the fiqh is to do make i'tikaf what? In a place in which no one knows you. You can be secluded and you can be alone, as Ibn Qayyim he then says. وكان إذا أراد الاعتكاف صلى الفجر ثم دخل فأمر به مرة فضرب له أو فضرب فأمر أزواجه بأخبيتهن فضربت فلما صلى الفجر نظر فرأى تلك الأخبية فأمر بخبائه فقوذ وترك الاعتكاف في شهر رمضان اعتكف في العشر الأول من شوال. And whenever the Prophet wanted to make i'tikaf, he would make the fajr and then he would go and make his intention for i'tikaf. It's another ruling. When do I make i'tikaf? When do I go into the masjid? Ibn Qayyim says the Prophet used to do it when? After fajr until the night time. And he goes on to talk about the Prophet and his wives, how they made i'tikaf, and how they had their own sections. وكان يعتكف كل سنة 10 أيام فلما كان في العام الذي قبض فيه اعتكف 20 يوما وكان يعارضه جبريل بالقرآن كل سنة مرة. The Prophet made i'tikaf 10 days out of every year, but in the last year of his life he made i'tikaf for 20 days. And that's when Jibreel alayhi salam did what? He would come and he would teach him the Quran every single year. فلما كان ذلك العام عرضه به مرتين وكان يعرض عليه القرآن أيضا في كل سنة مرة فعرض عليه تلك السنة مرتين. The Prophet ﷺ, he studied the Quran with Jibreel twice during the last year of his great life عليه الصلاة والسلام. وكان إذا اعتكف دخل قبته وحده وكان لا يدخل بيته في حال الاعتكاف إلا لحاجة الإنسان وكان يخرج رأسه من المسجد إلى بيت عائشة فترجله وتغسله وفي المسجد وهي حائض. Whenever the person wanted to make i'tikaf, he would enter into his qubbah. However you translate it, as a tent, as a dome, as a cubicle, his little what? Sector. His what? Jeremy, his chamber. In which he was secluded himself. And he would never go into his house or his homes unless someone else needed something. Not his own personal needs, but what? Someone else's needs. So this here shows us the permissibility of a person leaving the masjid, leaving his sector for something that's necessary. And even if it's not your own necessity, let alone if it's your own necessity. Ibn Qayyim then says, and sometimes he would stick his head out of the masjid's window, and Aisha would comb his hair and wash his hair, and he was in the masjid, and she was outside the masjid, and she was mincing. And this proves the permissibility and the recommendation for the one making i'tikaf to look after his hygiene. To look after his what? Hygiene. You don't have to be fancy, dressed, in the most spiffy, dapper clothes, but you shouldn't be smelling. You shouldn't be dirty. You should still look after the basic means of what? Of hygiene. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, وَكَانَتْ بَعْضُ أَزْوَاجِهِ تَزُورُهُ وَهُوَ مُعْتَكِفٌ فإذا قامت تذهب قام معها يقلبها وكان ذلك ليلا كذا يقلبها. He says here, and whenever the Prophet making i'tikaf, sometimes his wives would visit him. They would do what? Visit him while he's making i'tikaf. And he then says, and when his wife would get up, he would walk her out. He would walk her. That's a very interesting topic now. Did the wives of the Prophet, where did they come in? The masjid? Were they in the masjid? The brother's side, the brother's section? The masjid is separated? Everyone understand this? No, these issues are going to be too what? Too sticky. And most of us, our cups are what? Are going to be too full, pouring, spilling on the floor. So we're not going to get into those issues right now. But this is what Ibn Qayyim said. Not what? Muhammad ibn Munir. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, وَلَمْ يُبَاشِرْ امْرَأَةً مِنْ نِسَائِهِ وَهُوَ مُعْتَكِفٌ لَا بِقُبْلَةٍ وَلَا غَيْرِهَا وكان إذا اعتكف طرح له فراشه ووضي له سريره في معتكفه وكان إذا خرج لحاجته مر بالمريض وعلى طريقه فلا يعرج عليه ولا يسأل عنه واعتكف مرة في قبة تركية وجعل سدتها حصيرا. He then says how the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, when he made i'tikaf, he wouldn't touch his wives, he wouldn't hug them, he wouldn't kiss them. There was no type of intimate feelings or anything like this. So that proves that when they did visit him, it was just speech. Perhaps it was something that was beneficial, something that was necessary for the what? For the ummah. For the what? For the entire ummah. He says that the Messenger of Allah, ﷺ, whenever he left the masjid for need, and he saw someone who was sick or ill, he wouldn't bother them. He wouldn't visit them, because that's a fiqh issue. Is it permissible to make i'tikaf and visit the marid, the sick person? Visiting a sick person It's from the things that the Prophet ﷺ commanded the companions to do. As Al-Bara ibn Azib narrated in Sahihain, that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ commanded us to do how many things? 7. وَنَهَانَا عَنْ 7. He told us to do 7 and prohibited us from doing what? 7. From the things he says, وَعِيَادَ الْمَرِيض, visiting the ill, visiting the sick. That's a forgotten sunnah today, unfortunately. And I feel, my humble opinion, visiting the sick, not only is it a benefit for the ill person, but it's very similar to visiting the graves. It's like a miniature version of what? Visiting the graves. Because you see somebody sick, ill, someone dying, it is a closer reflection of what? Of death. Or just suffering. Realize what you have. Look at the body that you have. How many complications do you have? What's the big deal? Your leg is messed up. You lost a tooth. This happened to you. That happened to you. This person has tubes stuck down his throat. He's breathing on a machine. This person's legs are amputated. This person can't do this. He can't even clean himself. Akramakallah. May Allah help us all. So this is a very important concept of visiting the ill, visiting the sick. Let alone the benefit of making dua for them, making them happy. And only Allah knows how they feel when you visit them. Just like brothers who are incarcerated. No one can ever understand the value of a letter until you're what? Incarcerated. And what it feels like not to be forgotten. Out of sight, out of mind. This is the average person. My grandmother's in the hospital, my uncle's in the hospital, fleeing from the matches in the hospital. People forget about him. You come to him, you see him perhaps because you make him feel so happy, that may increase his what? Increase his health. Not as he may increase his health. As they said to Sheikh Simon ibn Taymiyyah, when he was sick one day, and the physicians, they said to him, they said, you have to stop reading so much. He says, you're reading too many books, it's strenuous on your body, especially stuff that you're reading. The raw stuff that you're reading. So Ibn Taymiyyah, he said to them, he says, don't you have the view that happiness aids the sick person and gets their spirits up, gets their morale up, and it can have an effect upon their health? They said, yes. He says, that's what these books do. So leave me be with my books. Everyone understand this? So the concept of visiting the ill, even though it's a virtuous deed, Ibn Qayyim says that the Prophet what? Wouldn't do it. So some of the ulama, they say that if a person makes an i'tikaf and they make a condition that I will visit the sick and I will follow the janazah procession, then it's what? Permissible. And the other ulama say to this, partial i'tikaf. You can make an i'tikaf for half of a day. Or you make an i'tikaf for 3 hours. And that can also benefit you, like a power nap. 3 hours in the masjid by myself, reading Quran, reflecting, making dua, crying on my sins. Only Allah knows that can do what? Put the battery in your back for you to lower your gaze. For you to stop behaving ignorantly. For you to be respectful to your mother, to your parents. Not get into an argument. Even though my mother, she may disrespect me. She may holler at me. She may curse at me. But because she's my mother, don't say to them, uff. وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. So Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says this is what some of the Messenger of Allah used to do. He says here, فَهَذَا لَوْنٌ وَالِاعْتِكَافُ النَّبَوِيُّ لَوْنٌ. He says, مَا يَفْعَلُ الْجُهَالُ مِنْ اتِّخَاذِ الْمُعْتَكِفِ مَوْضِعَ عِشْرَةٍ وَمَجْلَبَةً لِلزَّائِرِينَ وَأَخْذِهِمْ مِنْ أَطْرَافِ الْأَحَادِيثِ بَيْنَهُمْ. He says some people, they make i'tikaf to sit, to talk, to tell stories, to just have fun. He says this is a color, and the Prophet said i'tikaf is what? It's a different color. In other words, as we would say what? Like Eastern or like night and day. Like night and day. So this is some brief faida from Ibn Qayyim speech in Zad al-Ma'ad, Provisions for the Hereafter, which is one of the most beneficial books to read. It was one of the books that was advised, or we were advised, by Sheikh Abdul Muhsin Abbad from the Gullah Medina. He said the student of knowledge should read this book at least once every summer. Make this your mission now. The months that you have in the summer, read the entire book. In English or in Arabic. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala abdihi wa rasulihi Nabi Muhammad.